passion, focus, discipline. This is the Zero Excuses podcast. Each and every week, we talk to high-performing, inspirational athletes, entrepreneurs, and leaders. We ask powerful questions to extract their tools, strategies, and life lessons for you to crush your excuses, to break out of your comfort zone, and accomplish your ambitious dreams and goals. Here's your host, Kenyon Zitska.
Hey, what's going on, everyone? Welcome back to the Zero Excuses podcast. Thank you for tuning in. Excited to have you here today. And if this is your first time listening to the show, welcome. I appreciate everybody who listens to the show, whether it's your first time or if you've listened since day one. Appreciate you. So we have Larry Yatch joining us today. He is a retired Navy SEAL, and his core focus since leaving the military has been helping not only corporations, but also individuals re-engineer their behaviors, re-engineer their mindsets so that they can achieve the results that they want in their lives, get out of their own ways. And, you know, he does it from an engineering perspective, which I resonate with very highly. And as you'll hear during the show, we connect very, very well together, and we kind of do a little bit of live interaction, a little live training during today's episode. So it's a little bit different of a show in that regard. So I hope you guys get a ton of value out of it. I mean, I was geeking out the entire time just because, like Larry, I like to break things down into the most simple of terms so that you can see the problem and ultimately arrive at the solution to that problem in the most direct manner. Anyways, before we get into the conversation with Larry, just have a couple quick reminders, as always, here before we get into the conversation. First, if you haven't already done so, would appreciate it if you head to iTunes, kenyonzitska.com/iTunes, take you right to the page where you can subscribe, rate, and leave us a review for the show. And if you know of a friend or family member who will get value out of listening to the topics and strategies here, please share it with them. I appreciate everybody who has done all that so far, and I can't tell you how much it means to me that you guys have done that. Lastly, if any of these topics resonate with you and you want to explore them a little bit further, one of my missions here in 2019 is to connect and impact as many people as possible, and I'm doing that by offering everyone a free 30-minute strategy session where you can connect with me personally. If you just simply want to get to know me a little better too, that's also fair game. But you can go to kenyonzitska.com/call to book the call. It'll take you right to my calendar where you can find a mutually convenient time to connect with me, like I said. All right, enough on all that. Let's hop into this fantastic discussion with Larry. Larry Yatch, thanks for taking time out of what I'm sure is a busy schedule for you to join us here on the Zero Excuses podcast. Excited to talk to you.
Yeah, thank you. It's my pleasure to be here.
Yeah, so Larry, you're the CEO and founder of PlanSight. And, I've been following you for a couple years now, taking some of your courses in the past, and been listening to some of your work that you've done with Larry Hagner on the Dad Edge and whatnot. And really excited to finally get you on here to, just pick your brain a bit and learn how you help corporations and individuals engineer processes and help change, as you described it pre-show here, behavior change and just people, getting people to perform at their highest level. So I know you are also, you're a retired SEAL, or you didn't do quite 20, right?
No, I didn't. I got medically retired. So I got injured a couple times, and eventually through a severe injury and then some botched surgeries, they came in and told me, I remember when the surgeon came in and said, sorry, did so much damage to your back, nicked that nerve root, you're never going to feel your right leg again, your SEAL career's over, okay, see you later, bye. And my whole life had been from third grade going towards serving, and I had no backup plan, so it was quite the blow in that hospital bed. And it was actually my fiance at the time, my wife and current business partner, that really saved my life by showing me that my leadership in the teams is not much different than teaching, and being able to take our unique experiences, knowledge, and structures her whole concept was that we could still protect the country, but do it through education. And so that was the start of our first business in 2007. And we've been running a series of different training businesses for going on, 11 years now.
Right on. So has human performance and achieving one's greatness, is that obviously as a SEAL, that's one of your core, competencies, I'll call it. But has this always been an interest of yours from, like you said, third grade? Was that kind of where it came from, or did this kind of evolve through your career?
I would say it started off by being selfish in nature, right? So I found out about the SEALs in 7th grade, and that would have been in the late 80s, early 90s. So at that point, late 80s, no one really knew what a SEAL was.
Right.
So back then, there was hardly any information at all. And oddly enough, it was based on a friend of mine bought me a sweatshirt. The movie Navy SEALs with Charlie Sheen had come out. So he had bought that sweatshirt not because he knew what a Navy SEAL was, just because it was a cool logo and it said Navy on it. So he figured I'd like it. And I had no idea what it was. So I went to the library and found a book called The Men with Green Faces, which was a Vietnam era SEAL book. And by the end of the book, I was convinced fighter pilots were pansies and I needed to be a Navy SEAL instead.
Yeah.
The problem is I was not what you would consider SEAL material, right? I would have been voted least likely to be a Navy SEAL out of high school. I was a really small kid. I mean, because we're on a podcast, you can't see now, but I'm over 200 pounds, 6'3", but back in grade school and high school, I was a little skinny dork and got bullied quite a bit. But more importantly, I was never good at anything, right? I wasn't the star of any sport. I was never the best. I was able to learn quickly, which is arguably one of the most important skills and one of the most common traits of SEALs is we're the experts at becoming experts. The ability to get better than average at just about everything quickly is what enables us to be good. And that skill was developed over time. And like I said, selfishly, being in a situation where everyone said you can't be a SEAL, I then dove into how do I do that? And that's where my interest of development came into. And then once got into the teams, especially in BUDS, there's such a dichotomy between the guys you thought that were going to crush it and the guys that actually made it through. And that disconnect my engineer brain couldn't take. And that's really where I got into the neuroscience of it, of how can this be possible?
So I'm really curious to pick your brain on the neuro side of things. Like after you successfully completed BUDS, was this something that you what became a passion of yours? Where did that where did you start diving into this? What was I'm curious for myself.
Oh yeah. So. Two things. So two things kicked it off. First one, and I can't tell you which came first, and arguably they probably were about the same time. The first was the disconnect between the trainee who had on paper everything to be hugely successful. And I just don't mean physical. I mean, maturity, experience, and physicality. And to watch them quit, and to watch the guy from Oklahoma that's 30 pounds overweight, that's never seen anything bigger than a swimming pool, finish. And again, this logical engineer brain I have was just bothered by that. Like, how is this possible? So exploring that was one. And then the other one was fear. And it didn't make sense to me how fear showed up in my life. And I could see it in others. And the disconnect here was where the real disconnect came to up ahead. So this was my first deployment. We were in Guam before we went on our way overseas over to the Middle East. And we were at the unit there, and they had this indoor climbing wall. And so I love climbing. I've always loved climbing. So we'd spend hours and hours on this wall. All the way to the right side, there was one like super easy route. And so at the end of the day, what we would do is just climb that route over and over again until you just give up, like you couldn't do it anymore. So I climbed this route hundreds of times. So I got in my head one day, well, I'm going to climb it without a rope. So altogether, it's like a 60-foot climb, but it's cement. So you get up 20 feet, you fall, it's going to hurt. And I remember getting about 20 feet up, and I start shaking. and I'm having trouble continuing, yet I've never fallen off the route and I've climbed it 200 times. So why am I feeling fear and anxiety on something that I shouldn't? And I remember giving up, and I went from one and moved over, and there was a ladder next to the wall to service the wall. So I got on the ladder and all the fear went away. And that's when it hit me. I'm like, wait a minute here. I'm essentially on a ladder with these big jugs all the way up this wall. I'm scared. I go to a ladder. I'm the same height up. I don't have a rope. There's no safety. And just because it's a metal ladder, I don't have any fear anymore. And that disconnect hooked me. I'm like, I got to figure this out. So those were the two things.
So let's go to the fear component here, because I think that's most relatable to people listening right now. So start unpacking that. How did you start discovering what makes that fear and anxiety, I guess, tick within inside of it?
So we can go kind of two routes with this, and I think the second route's going to be better. So I could go through and kind of unpack how I figured it out, which would be interesting but less useful. What I can do is in about 6 minutes, I'll just blow your mind on completely breaking fear, anxiety, and courage apart. So I think that's more useful because it's super applicable.
Yeah, let's do it. Blow minds.
So we can go about this two ways as well. Do you want to participate or just want me to tell you? I'd rather you
participate. Yeah, let's choose. Okay. I like this choose your own adventure type.
Yeah, I know.
Scenario here. This is cool.
Okay, so what is the definition of courage for you?
Courage is
one line. You can't go on for a half an hour.
Doing what you know must be done despite any obstacle that may be in front of you.
Good. So we're really close. So I'm just going to refine what you said, but you're on it. So courage is not the absence of fear. It's taking action despite fear.
Yeah.
Cool. Which is basically what you said, like doing the thing even when it's hard or you got enough. Yeah. So if courage is not the absence of fear, it's taking action despite fear. What's the most important part of courage?
Taking action.
No. Can you take action without courage, without illustrating courage?
Oh yeah, you could take action all day without having courage.
So then what's the most important part of courage?
Oh, the fear part.
Fear.
Yeah.
So this alone is paradigm changing for people. And if there's any parents out there, think about this. Imagine if you knew this and you were able to teach this to your kids, that those with the greatest fear have the potential for the most courage. Right? You can't have courage without fear. Right? All of a sudden, fear isn't a bad thing. It isn't something to hide from. It's something to find, to see, and to use. That alone can change someone's life. Right? People look at me and what I've done and say, oh, you're so courageous, you're never scared. Bullshit. I'm scared all the time. I just take action despite being scared. That's where courage can be shown. So that alone is huge. Again, I want to pause there and see what you think.
Oh yeah, that's something that I've kind of had in the back of my mind, but I've never framed it so concisely as you just did. So again, I'm an engineer as well. So breaking things down into simple constituent parts and then putting it back together is
just wait. It's going to get better. You're going to really like this.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that's really one of my superpowers is what I refer to as distillation. So I can distill very complex things into fundamental principles that are applicable, and that's what I love doing. And I do that on the most challenging things, which is behavior, right? Human behavior. So let's continue because now I'm having a blast because you're just going to really like this. So courage is not the absence of fear; it's taking action despite fear. The most important part of courage is fear. If you don't have fear, you can't have courage. So then that begs the question, what is fear?
It's something that we aren't familiar with, or it causes us anxiety.
There, you're getting there. So fear is represented by feelings of anxiety, right? Uncomfortable feelings. Where does it come from? All the time, every time, no matter what.
It comes from, physically it comes from the animalistic portion of our brain, our fight or flight mechanism.
The feeling does, right? The fear doesn't come from that, but our experience of fear comes from our physiological response. Where does the fear come from?
Yeah, fear comes from I guess, the meaning that we place on whatever that situation is. It's our perception of that.
Okay, so within that, there's a key part of that perception. When was the last time you felt fear? Or anxiety? Doesn't matter because they're really one and the same.
Oh yeah, it's tough because I've taught myself that anxiety is a good thing. So I kind of, there's a healthy anxiety about things that I approach things with. But probably the biggest piece of anxiety was, I think I mentioned pre-show, I did a 12-mile ruck, but what I didn't mention was the fact that I've been dealing with bronchitis all of January, so I hadn't really worked out. So I said I was going to do this, so I was feeling some fear that I would not complete this, or I'd pass out in the middle of the beach where no one was around.
Perfect example. Okay, so you had some fear and anxiety around this big ruck. You were just getting into what was causing it. So if you look at those things that were causing it, right, you might fall on the beach and no one is there. You might not be able to finish it. How could you summarize those things? What is that?
Those are things that are possible but unlikely to occur.
Yeah. So the key is it's a perceived lack of control.
Yeah.
Right. Like you couldn't control your safety. Right. If something happens, you're stuck on the beach by yourself. You can't control if you finish it or not because you haven't worked out. So all fear and anxiety comes from a perceived lack of control. Yeah. Now, do we have fears and anxieties? And notice I didn't say a perceived lack of control to keep ourselves safe. Right. Originally, when we were cave people, all fear was that. Right. All fear and anxiety was stemmed from not being able to keep ourselves safe.
Right.
But the phone rings, you see that it's your boss, and you get fear and anxiety, even though your boss can't make you unsafe. So in our modern world, any perceived lack of control drives fear and anxiety, and our bodies respond as if a tiger is about to eat us, and we don't know the difference.
Yeah, we got to find something to replace that with in the modern day and age.
Yep. So in this, you can separate fear into two things, necessary and unnecessary fear. So necessary fears keep you safe. Unnecessary fears hamper you. An example of necessary fear is having a necessary fear of a rattlesnake, right? I'm hiking. There's a rattlesnake in front of me. It can hurt me, right? So feeling fear and anxiety around that is okay. It serves me because then I can go around it. I'll leave the snake alone. Being afraid of the dark is an unnecessary fear, right? That restricts my choices, my ability, right? If I'm afraid of the dark, I can't leave my house at night. I can't go to a movie. I have to keep the lights on. So oddly enough, necessary fears open possibilities, right? Within the snake example, if I'm using a necessary fear, I can do everything but be on top of that snake, right? So it opens possibilities. Unnecessary fears close possibilities. If I'm scared of the dark, I can't do a whole bunch of stuff. So one of the first steps to illustrating courage or to dealing with fear is assessing, is this a necessary fear that's keeping me safe, or is it an unnecessary fear that's hampering me? Because I'm going to do two different things to address them.
Yeah, it's very simple. Like you said, you broke down so simply.
So then we get into, once we do that, what do we do? Once we identify, okay, we have an unnecessary fear around, say, public speaking, right? Common fear. We have an unnecessary fear around public speaking. Public speaking can't kill us, can't really hurt us physically, so it's an unnecessary fear. If fear is a perceived lack of control, the only way to deal with it is to gain a perception of control. So how do we do that? We have to generate power. Power is the ability to influence change. And this is an engineering definition as well. Any form or source of power gives us the ability to influence change. So as a human being, what's the recipe for power? It's always the same. Since we live in a non-labor-based world anymore, right? No longer can we just physically work harder to succeed. In order to succeed in today's world, it's knowledge-based, right? If we are struggling, it's because we don't know something. And so our ability as human beings to produce power is dependent on increasing our knowledge. And we do that through this simple recipe: learn, practice, gain experience. When we learn, practice, and gain experience, we produce the ability to influence change, which is power. Now, power is potential energy. Like, and again, speaking to a fellow engineer, you know what I'm talking about, like electrical power can potentially be useful. It isn't until I control that power through wires and light bulbs and light switches that I can actually use my power. So in order to use your power, you have to illustrate control. How do we do that? The same formula. So learn, practice, gain experience. When we put action to it, we start to build control. So when we put action to something we've learned, we use knowledge. When we put action to something we practice, we illustrate skill. When we put action to our experience, we have or show confidence. When we show confidence, we could take action despite fear. Through illustrating control, we now have courage.
Yeah, so that, I mean, this sounds very simple, very practical. But I can imagine there might be some folks out there listening right now, like this sounds a lot easier said than done. How do you, I guess,
step by step, right? So
yeah,
simple step by step. What are you scared of? I'm scared of public speaking. Okay, is that a necessary fear or unnecessary fear? Obviously an unnecessary fear. Okay, that means I have to develop a perception of control when I go to speak. And I'm very precise with my words, a perception of control. I can't ever control anything. I can influence stuff, but I can't control anything. So just that opens possibilities. Like knowing, like when I go on stage, I don't control the audience. I don't control their judgment. I don't control their reaction. I don't even really control my own actions. I just kind of influence my own actions. So I'm just looking for a perception of control. How do we build that? Well, look at the formula. I need to develop power when it comes to public speaking. I need to learn, practice, and gain experience. What do I have to learn? Well, easy. I can go take a public speaking course, right? I can learn how to design a good speech. Okay, practice. Practice means I can fail. It's not practice if I can't fail. So I'm going to then take what I've learned, how to speak, and this new format in speaking, and I'm going to practice it alone, right in front of a camera, and I'm the only one that watches it, because now I can utterly fail and there's no real risk to me. As I start to increase the risk, I start to gain experience. And that's where a lot of people screw up. They learn something and then they try to gain experience without practicing by adding too much risk. So as I start to increase risk, then I've done it a couple of times. I've watched a video. Now I'm going to ask my wife, hey, can I do this in front of you? Then I'm going to do it in front of my family or some friends. And then I'm going to do it in an audience like Toastmasters where people are there to help you.
Yeah.
Now, every time I do that, I'm gaining more experience. What's happened to my confidence level? It's increasing. What's happening to my perception of control? It's increasing. So when I then go to get on top of that stage, I'm still going to feel fear and anxiety, but I'm going to take action despite it. So that's how it applies.
Yeah. I mean, you basically broke down the blueprint of how I kind of overcame my own fear of public speaking. Yes. Starting this very podcast. That's kind of why one of the selfish reasons why I started the podcast.
Exactly.
was to do that. But I can sense there's like another component here that we might need to address here is that fear of failure. That's another a big one out there that I see people shying away from. I would say the majority of the population shies away from fear of failure. And I actually read a statistic in a book I'm reading that at least 40% or greater of millennials have a very persistent fear of failure. And I think that's pretty alarming. And I see the work that you do as one of the ways that we can kind of overcome this. I see that as very problematic.
Where do you think that comes from?
I think it comes from just the social media projecting this sense of perfection, the sense of everyone's got their shit together.
So I think that adds to it, right? Because now I have I can very visibly fail because other people are watching me. But I think the origins actually quite a bit older and deeper. I think it starts with, right, especially this millennial pop generation really grew up in everyone's a winner, right?
Yes. Yeah.
So, okay, if we start looking at that, what neurologically, right, through the neuroscience of it, what does that actually cause, or what is that, the results of that? Have you ever heard of a book called Mindset from Carol Dweck?
Absolutely. Yep.
So Carol Dweck in Mindset did this study, she's a Stanford psychologist, did this groundbreaking study around the impact of two basic mindsets. growth versus fixed. Fixed mindset thinks that my knowledge, skills, intelligence is fixed, right? I'm born with it. And I'm either good at something or I'm not. And I have natural gifts and talent. Now, when on the growth mindset side, I know that every capability I have comes from work. Like if I work on something, I get better at it and I can do anything. Now there's limits to my skill, but I'm never at that limit, right? I can always make it better. Very different mindset. What she unveiled that was really, really pivotal is that you can influence a growth or fixed mindset simply by how you are spoken to. One sentence can change you from one to another. If you are praised for ability, like Larry's like saying, I'm a really good engineer, or I'm really good at distilling things. What that means is, I've always, and you'll hear language like this, I've always been good at this, or Larry's always been good at math. Now, the challenge of that, of praising for ability, is the first time I do bad on a math test, it's a lie, right? This truth that I've been living in, Larry's good at math. If I do bad on a test, it's a lie. I'm not good at math. And if I was once always good at it and now I failed, I'm never going to be good at it again. That's why they don't want to have failure. Because if you were told, oh, you're special, you're a winner, everything you do is great, you want to live in that untruth. And if you do something that can cause a failure, now all of a sudden you're not a winner. And so that's the huge problem. They've been conditioned from a young age to be in a fixed mindset. And until you can get okay with failure, knowing that the only way to success is to fail, because failure is just the opportunity to learn, and learning in and of itself is admitting failure, right? I can't even be open to learning unless I admit insufficiency to begin with. So until you switch over into that growth mindset to know that anything's possible, I can do anything if I put enough focus and work to it. Challenges, difficulties, failures are simply my way to mastery. That shift in mindset is what enables learning. And it starts in how you talk to people. Our boys, so I have a 4.5-year-old and a 2.5-year-old, they aren't good at anything. You will never hear my wife or I ever praise them for any skill that they have. What we do praise them for is good work. So you'll hear that all the time. Good work. It was amazing how much work you put into that. Right? Look at the results that came from all that work. Now, say they do something and they naturally do have predispositions for things, right? So right. One is predisposed to be better at certain things than the other. If they do something that's easy, we literally make fun of them. Like, oh, that was a waste of your time. Because we don't want them to be attracted to easy things. We only want them to be attracted to hard things, because that enables constant growth and establishes that fixed mindset.
Yeah, I've got a 4.5-year-old daughter, and one of my mantras when I'm dealing with her, trying to keep in mind, is praise the effort, not necessarily the result. So I'm lockstep with you.
And definitely not the skill.
Yeah,
like not the skill or your ability. Never skill and ability, just effort. And seeing that, it was funny. Like we of course, Ann and I take everything to the extreme. We were in our oldest was in this Montessori school, and one day we were picking him up from school, and the teacher said, next month, Colton's chance to be the star of the month. Like, well, what does that mean? Well, he gets to be celebrated all month, and there's posters, and we say how good he is and all this stuff. And I'm like, well, did he do anything special? No. So why does he get all this attention? Well, because it's his turn. No thanks. And she looked at us like we were nuts. I'm like, no, we don't. If he didn't do anything special, he doesn't get the praise, right? And the way they had it set up was this like, you're the big winner this month. Yet he didn't do anything to earn it. And so that disconnect wasn't there. Like if it was, okay, let's celebrate his family or what he did for summer, like that type of thing, fine. But no, this was creating fixed mindset. We said, no, we opted out. He doesn't get to be the star of the month.
Yeah, I mean, you almost have to look back at our time in the Navy. You don't get an award just for the sake of it. You get an award for the effort that you put forth and the results that you yet as because of those efforts. So
yeah, and it's even harder to work for me because I had the honor of working with such a high level, right? Like it's just the highest level in the world. My expectation of performance was 110%. What I mean was I expected the guys to surprise me every time with what they did. Like they would always go above what the standard was. And that was pure expectation. Like if they didn't go above 100%, they failed. Like if they just did what we were supposed to do, that was a failure. They didn't get a good job for doing 110%. They get a good job when they blew my mind. Like when someone would do 140%. Then it's like, yeah, good job. Like that's very impressive. In the civilian world, and I've run mid-sized companies with a whole bunch of employees. If someone does 80%, they expect a reward. Like, and it would blow them. Like you didn't even finish. You just did 80% of it. I had one guy that I had to put in my calendar to tell me he did a good job every 2 weeks just so he would keep working. No, I wouldn't. It wasn't like find something. I mean, because he just was doing his job, but I had to tell him good job for doing your job just to keep him motivated. It just blew my mind. And so, yeah, I recognize it's hard to work for me because I expect 110% as just standard. And you should surprise me with some sort of amazing thing. I don't know, every 3 weeks.
Well, let's dive down into that. Like, what was your transition like from the military world into the civilian world? I know you gave us a little peek there.
Yeah, it was horrible. It was hard. I mean, it was really, really hard. And in the one of the biggest challenges is people, right? Finding people that are going to perform at the level that I was used to, and it continues to be a challenge, and ultimately what we've set to do is that we only work with people we train, because at that point we're going to build. What we do is build highly effective people and highly effective teams. So I build my employees now. It isn't a matter of, I'm not going to find someone and hire them. Now, finding the only ones I can kind of do that with is other special operators, because they have a baseline of experience, but most of them don't want to work for someone, right? Because they're hard charging.
Yeah.
So it's kind of hard to find those. So I've resorted to, I'm going to build them. I build highly effective people and then hire them.
Yeah, I've got a similar experience. I actually I transitioned out of active duty after 10 years into the reserves. And that was my biggest struggle, besides actually applying the systems and disciplines that I learned in the military to my civilian life, but was like working with people as well that they just show up and expect a paycheck and do, like you said, the 80%. And I tried going back on active duty to get back into that culture, get back into that culture of excellence and not BSing around. And the biggest struggle I had was dealing with people who you say hi to, how's it going, and they just say, one more day closer to retirement, just kind of checking the box. So, but yeah, I've been gravitating towards some of these physical fitness events like Go Ruck and Spartan races and stuff. I'm definitely finding people of that mindset in these locations. It's refreshing to see that.
Another kind of consistent rule I have is that normal is bad.
Yeah.
Right. So the circle of normal does not intersect with a circle of excellence, like extraordinary, superior, right? They just don't connect. And so the worst thing you can call me is normal. And I take that to the extreme of nothing we do is normal. Right? How we live isn't normal. The business, how we teach, the tools that we use, the way we break stuff down is all not normal. And the people that I work with aren't normal. Normal people aren't worth my time. Now it's because you could take a normal person, make him a little bit better, but because of their concern to be normal, right, to fit in, they're always going to be limited. When you find someone that understands that being abnormal, being it outside is where the huge potential growth is, that's someone that you can just explode.
Yeah. If you want results that only 99% of the people in this world only dream of. You have to be willing to do what 99% of people aren't willing to do.
And act that way, right? Yeah. And it comes down, the key part is behavior, right? Your behavior has to be different than everyone else's, or you're going to end up with the same result.
Yeah. So again, you mentioned, one of the focuses you guys, focus on is behavior change. And you also mentioned that there's a lot of technology and software that you employ. I'm really curious to hear a little bit about, what the software is and
yeah, totally. Yeah. So I guess the best way to describe it is to kind of break it down so we can pick something like, let's say, subconscious choices, habits. Mm-hmm. Right. Let's pick, because that's ultimately where most people struggle the most in change, right? Is changing their habits. So with that, I'll just distill in a couple minutes where our habits come from, because then from there you can understand how we can modify it. Our subconscious choices, our habits come from two things: established patterns that we recognize. A technical way to say that is neural pathways, right? So our brains are really big pattern recognition engines and pattern storing engines, right? Their job is to store patterns, recognize patterns they've seen in the past so that we can reduce the energy necessary to act. And because we were cave people with limited resources for hundreds of thousands of years, effort, putting out energy was death, right? So that we always were just designed to optimize energy output. We want to limit it. So our ability to recognize patterns and fire those patterns at low cost kept us alive. Does that all make sense?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
Yep. So our brains, all they do is record patterns and look for them. The second part of it is those patterns are fired by stimulus, right? So certain external stimuli, be it it could be a physical thing, it could be something we see, we smell, we hear, it could be a conversation. I mean, any number of external stimuli, what they do is fire a pattern, right? It's one of these patterns we have established. If we want to change that, so if we're looking at every habit, every subconscious choice we make is some external stimulus, some environmental stimulus fires a pattern we've established, we can change our habits by changing one of those two things. We can change the stimulus that are around us, or we can change our neural pathway. Which do you think is easier?
Probably the stimulus.
Yeah, exactly. Right. So it's generally lower cost to change your environment than it is to change an established neural pathway. But this is where the magic happens. Say I change my environment and I have another stimulus that I have to react to that I don't recognize. What does my brain do?
Triggers that fight or flight response. It's unfamiliar.
What it'll do is like, oh, this is new. As long as I'm not in danger, right? This is new. I'm going to record this as a new pattern. And then if I see it again, it's going to fire that pattern again. I see that 10 more times. I'm building a new pattern. So I'm actually rewiring the neural pathway as long as my environment supports these new stimulus. So it becomes a 1-2 punch, right? It's easier. Like I could try to program a new neural pathway, but that's high cost. If I choose my environment, my pattern recognition engine is going to create a new pattern. As long as that pattern's fired more than the old one, eventually I've got a new habit. So it's this 1-2 punch. So with that, what we've done is, theoretically that makes sense. But just like when we were talking about courage and fear, you're like, well, what do I do with that? It gets a lot harder to say, I want to change my habit of coming home stressed from work, sitting down in front of the TV and having 3 beers, right? Like I got that pattern of behavior and then the stimulus to do it. What do I do about that? What I've done over years is be able to change those behaviors for people. And then what I did is distill that into a process. And then that process is always the same. I ask questions, right? So I'm going to ask you a series of questions. And as I get those answers, once you ask enough questions, you basically build out the plan. So we took each one of those questions and put it into a software. So when you go in, you identify, okay, what habit do I want to change? What action? And then it's going to step you through one question at a time each step. When you hit submit, the algorithm takes all of your answers and kicks out a plan for behavior change, a 3-page plan. So then now I've got, this is exactly what I do to change it. In that example, if we kind of go through that process, what I do, so I come home stressed from work, I grab the 6-pack, I sit in front of the TV, I drink beer. What part of my environment could I change so that that habit doesn't happen?
Either get rid of the TV or get rid of the beer.
Or what? There's one more thing you could get rid of.
The stress.
Yep. There you go. Right. So you can once you identify what environmental triggers doing it, you can start to identify, well, what can I remove? Start, stop, or modify. So I could turn off cable, throw the TV out the window. I could make sure there's no beer in the fridge. Or I could figure out how to enter the house not stressed. Maybe that means I stopped at the gym on the way home to work out my aggression and show up not stressed. And then from there, so now I identify what environmental cue does it. We're going to figure out what specific behavior do I want. Do I want the behavior of coming home and connecting with my wife instead of watching TV, drinking beer? Do I want to have my health be better? Well, maybe I get rid of stress by going to the gym instead. So you're going to identify what positive behavior you want, tying to the change in the environment. And then the last part of it, what mood do I need to be in? Right? Like, how do I create that mood where I feel energized and empowered to go to the gym if that's what I'm going to do? So you identify all these things, you hit submit, and then there's your plan of action. Implement your plan.
Yeah, breaking it down, stupid simple there. I mean, it's
exactly.
That's a very common problem, and a lot of people go through it. And I was right there with a lot of those people.
Yeah, me too.
The biggest change I made was like making fitness and health a big priority. And, that's something I encourage everybody to look at. And it's we're sitting here talking, and you break it down so simply. It sounds a lot easier than it is to actually implement.
And that's where coaching, right? Like, we talked about this. What is the purpose of a coach? So, for me, my primary purpose is teaching, right? So what I do is break stuff down and give people tools. My wife, my partner in this, her primary thing is coaching. What's the difference between coaching and teaching? When you teach, a teacher talks 80% of the time, asking 20% of the time asking questions. A coach asks questions 80% of the time and talks 20, right? So the point of a coach isn't to give you the plan. The point of the coach is to ensure that you can fulfill on that plan. And so it is a 1-2 punch, right? People could be listening and have these, what are bulletproof formulas for courage, bulletproof formula for subconscious behavior change. We laid it out in a way that if you just listen to this podcast and wrote the notes down, you got all the steps. They're still going to need coaching in it. And that's it's just the way it goes. So, my suggestion is, learn these things, but then make sure that you have the support, right? Yeah. Be able to connect to someone that can help you implement, because doing it on your own, the most important thing in our lives as human beings is team, right? We knew, again, going back to caveman times, if we weren't part of the tribe, we were dead. Like, we could not survive on our own. So the thing that is the most hardwired into us is the need to be part of a team, to be part of a tribe, to be part of a group. And if you're out there trying to do any of this stuff on your own, you're literally working against millions of years of evolution that to every cell, every neuron in your body, that I need to be part of the group, because if I'm not, I'm going to suffer and die. So don't try and solve any of this shit on your own.
Yeah. And, the biggest, the outcome of a coach versus a teacher is essentially the same thing. But the biggest difference is the coach makes the solution owned by the person. And the teacher pretty much owns the solution. So that sense of ownership, like you've arrived at your own solution, is so much stronger, because like, man, I solved my own problem. The coach just kind of facilitated that, whereas the teacher just kind of puked out the solution and just kind of wrote it on a whiteboard.
Yeah, like, here it is. Like, you got all the tools that you need, but just because you have a new tool doesn't mean you're going to know how to use it. And that's where the coach comes in, to be able to guide you in the use.
Yep. Well, Larry, I would love, this has been actually an absolutely fascinating discussion, but we're starting to run up against time here. But I did want to make sure that I leave a few minutes here at the end to give you a chance to talk about exactly how to get a hold of you, where people can find you on social media, and what do you have, maybe people are thirsty for a little bit more of what we've talked about here. How can they do that?
Yeah, completely. So with that, just to kind of put some clarity as to what we do and where we can offer benefit is in three big buckets. They're all basically behavior buckets. So the first one is in engineering, designing high functioning teams. So within that, how do you systematically create teams to support everything you need in your life? And that we approach it the same way for a $1 billion high-tech pharmaceutical company as we do our marriage, my wife and I. We use the same tools. So this is, if you need help redesigning the team that is your marriage or your family or your business, we've got, as you hear, we've got not only information, but solid structure software that goes in to help you do that on a consistent basis. The next thing is what we're talking about today, behavior change, right? Being able to systematically plan for effective behavior in yourself and others. And that is a huge shift. Almost all of us react to behavior. We react to our own behavior, and we react to the behavior of those around us. And by turning anything from reaction to proaction, we change the trajectory of our experience. So being able to be proactive in behavior change. And the last one is in what I refer to as tactical planning. So it's in between strategy and implementation, being able to systematically solve problems, implement projects, again, supported by both information and knowledge. So that's where we offer help. Our sweet spot on the business side is if you've hit a revenue plateau. So if you've been in a company, you've had good growth, and you hit a point where no matter what you do, you're stuck. That generally happens at the $1 million mark, the $8 to $10 million mark, and the $30 to $40 million mark. Then after that, it's 100 million, 500. So if you're there, what we do, it's a behavior issue that's restricting your ability to grow. What the behavior that got you to 1 million, 8, 30, 100 is not the behavior that gets you past. So being able to systematically change behavior of the organization enables you to grow. So if you're stuck there, we can help you on the corporate side. If you have any desire to optimize your personal behavior of others, your team, we can do that on the individual level through all sorts of different ways. So with that, hopefully you can tell huge passion for this. Again, I've had a blast with you because it's same thing, right? Like I could just see the joy in these things. So absolutely love it. We continue to get to fulfill our purpose of making the country stronger through education as opposed to being on the front lines anymore. So yeah, giving us the opportunity to fulfill our purpose through this education stuff is huge. So with that, if you have any interest, one of the things I will offer, mostly just because the fact that you and I are on the same page here for sure, your audience has to as well. So what I'd like to offer, and I don't usually do this, is anyone that's listened that this really connects to, we'll offer a free half an hour strategy session where if something you got triggered in you and in hearing this or need, we'll spend a half an hour with you talking through giving you clarity on what to do next. It isn't a sales thing, so we aren't going to sell you on anything. All we do is provide value. So we'll offer those strategy sessions to anyone in the audience that wants it. We generally leave 10 to 15 of those open. So first come, first serve. You can get access to that at www.plan-sight.com/clarity.
Well, right on. Well, I'm probably going to take advantage of that.
Yeah,
a little selfishly, and
good. Number one is yours.
Yeah, I'll be setting that up as soon as we get done recording here. But no, I appreciate all your time, and we'll have to maybe do a round two sooner rather than later. Again, it's been a fascinating discussion. I appreciate your time.
Yeah, my pleasure. Thank you so much.
Have any quick nuggets that you want to drop on us before we sign off here?
Yeah, the biggest one, and this is what the trajectory of my life changed dramatically a year and a half ago. We had what was arguably 3 very successful businesses, and yet we were more miserable than we've ever been in our life. We were on the brink of divorce, and I know my wife is an angel that saved me, and we are an amazing team together, yet we were struggling, regardless of the work that we did. And the connection with my sons was not where I wanted it. And we made a huge change. And this nugget is what enabled that change. When you, anytime you react in your life, react to anything in your life, your experience trends down. Anytime that you are proactive in your life, your experience trends up. And so we stopped reacting to clients' needs. We stopped reacting to the business directing our life. We stopped reacting to how we had to live, and we started taking complete control of all of it, and everything has gotten 100 times better. So if there's anything I can leave the audience with, it's look anywhere you are getting your ass kicked by your environment in your life where you're reacting, that's where if you take control of it, it all changes.
Yep. Take the fight to the enemy. Don't let the enemy come to you.
Exactly.
So, all righty, man. Well, thanks again. And like I said, we'll have to stay connected and do round 2 here.
Sure. I'm all in. Thanks, man.
All righty. Thanks again.
Thank you for tuning in to the Zero Excuses podcast. Join the conversation at KenyonZitska.com in our Facebook group. And don't forget to rate and subscribe to our show. We'll talk to you next week. And always remember, results, not excuses.